Florida Athletic Director Scott Stricklin isn't opposed to adding Florida State to the SEC. I think he's out of his mind.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth: realignment, coaching, carousel, the portal, and more. We've always got you covered. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Tons to get to in this, the last show in the month of May, but fear not, the content continues in June every day, all year round. We have Big Sky Commissioner Tom Wistrcill, his thoughts on the Big Ten, the SEC realignment, and all the changes going on right now. He's got great insight. Do not miss that interview, and we'll ask the age-old question. How good can Iowa be with that offense in 2024? All coming up, but we start with Florida. So, Florida Athletic Director Scott Stricklin was asked coming out of SEC meetings about the prospect of adding Florida State to the SEC. They're, of course, suing Clemson, or they and Clemson are suing the ACC to get out, and we don't actually know where they would go. They have to have a plan, but here's what he had to say, quote, "We have a good relationship with our friends in Tallahassee. No school has a veto in this league. If you get 3/4 of the league to support expansion, we're going to expand. Anybody who made our league better, we'd be supportive of joining the SEC. Whenever we've expanded in the past, the leadership of the league was able to lay out this is why it makes sense to bring in Arkansas and South Carolina, A&M and Missouri, why Texas and OU make sense. We all saw financial projections, competitive rationale, and 3/4 of the league said, let's do this. If there were ever opportunities out there, and again, no one has had any conversations, that is the scenario where somebody walks in and says, here's a school, here's what they bring to the table, here's how it makes us all better, we would be supportive of that," end quote. That's from the Sports Illustrated site, Noles Game Day. Okay. If you are Florida and you are trying to recapture what Florida once was and bring the University of Florida football program to what it can be, why on earth do you want more direct competitors? If you're Florida, you should want the ACC to win that lawsuit and keep Florida State in the ACC. Because if you're Billy Napier going out and trying to recruit and trying to get kids to come to the University of Florida instead of Florida State, who were, the SEC or the ACC champions a year ago, Florida hasn't sniffed that under Billy Napier at this point in time. And I have no idea if Napier is supportive of what Scott Stricklin is saying here. But if you're Scott Stricklin, you got to have a little bit more awareness in that. I mean, this is clearly their position, or he would not have stated it publicly. But I do not understand what Florida has to gain by bringing in your in-state rival, who you already play in football. Like, it's not as if they don't play him. But on the recruiting trail, on the talent acquisition front, you can hold over Florida State's head to any kid. We're in the SEC. This is the best conference. This is where the most money is. This is where the biggest brands are. And Florida State is in the ACC. We're trying to become a big fish in the biggest and best pond. They're being a big fish in a much smaller pond. So as you look to try and rebuild your program and elevate it to a championship level, in what way does Florida State elevating its profile even higher help you? That's not good for you. That's bad for you. Because then it'll be harder to out-recruit Florida State. And right now, I don't think you can out-coach Florida State because Mike Norvell is better than Billy Napier. And so if you're already just thinking in the present, but this applies to the long-term prospects of either football program as well, in the present, you're not going to go on the field. I mean, they're behind Florida State right now. Florida has the toughest schedule in all of college football. I think everybody understands that pretty well. And they would have a win total higher than 4.5 or 5.5. It fluctuates back and forth a little bit if they were playing an ACC schedule. That's 100% true. But it wouldn't be 9.5. Florida in the ACC wouldn't be seen as a title contender. They'd be closer to what, Duke or Syracuse are going to be than what Miami and NC State and Louisville are trying to do, which is get in with the top two, that being Clemson and Florida State. So let's not pretend like Florida is something that they're not. They would be better in the ACC. They wouldn't be great. They wouldn't be the top team in there. And I think that this notion of, we'd welcome them into the league. It's great. It's not great that Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC if you're Florida. That's not as direct of a recruiting competition because they're dealing with a different home ground or a different home state or area that they tend to dominate in recruiting. But Florida is one of the 3 premier recruiting states in the entire country, along with Texas and California. And you've got to be able, if you want to get to the level where Georgia is, where Florida used to be, where Alabama is, and even LSU or where Ole Miss is right now, quite frankly, you have to be able to dominate your in-state recruiting. If Florida is at its absolute best, it is dominating the in-state recruiting scene in Florida. But if you introduce Florida State into the mold, you're not just bringing another conference championship and national championship caliber program and team into your league. You are bringing in a direct in-state competitor for the same kids who Florida is frankly doing a better job than you'd think. Billy Napier has a losing record at Florida, yet he is recruiting at a high level. I think it's one of the reasons that his job is still somewhat safe, is because he's bringing in talent in a way that leads the boosters, alumni, and fans to believe, hey, he could turn this around. This is looking good, but that's going to get harder. Yeah, it might only be a small handful of players, but a small handful of players who decide to go elsewhere, that can be the difference between you having a championship team and not. You may miss out on this transfer or that transfer because, there's another SEC school in the state of Florida. Ask Auburn how easy it is to be in the same state as another SEC school that has as big or bigger of a brand. And you can argue, I'm not going to make a case one way or the other, does FSU or Florida have a bigger brand in college sports? At the very least, they are similar. And when one team or when one program is operating at a higher level than you, which Florida State absolutely has been the last several years, and I think they've made a better hire in Mike Norvell compared to Billy Napier, I cannot see why that would benefit Florida in any way, shape, or form. Even if they bring a financial windfall to the conference, it's going to be so marginal because the gap has already been created. Florida's not lacking money. That is not Florida's problem. Florida's already in the SEC. They're getting a full media rights share. That is not what is holding them back from being where they would like to be in college sports. I think it would be a mistake for them to say, yeah, let's welcome in Florida State. Heck, bring in Clemson as well. That's just more competition for you. But you know what? I can respect you being all about that smoke while also recognizing this is not the best tactical move as you try to build to a conference championship level. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @SMcLaughlinCFB. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a commissioner in college sports? You're going to get an up-close and personal insight on that coming up next. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, which makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier if you want to go. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down as they get closer to tip-off. Not up, they go down. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege with college in all caps for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. What's it like to be in the thick of the realignment landscape? Very special guest joining me today, Tom Wistrcill, commissioner of the Big Sky Conference, the best FCS football conference around. Tom, it's great to have you here, and let's hop right into it. When the House settlement got announced and there was $2.7 billion in damages to pay, and the Big Ten, SEC, and other power conferences said, yeah, we're going to have 60% of that get paid by everybody else. How'd you react to that?
Well, I had a couple of different thoughts. One is I'm glad the settlement's happening. We need the settlement. It's the best case scenario for all 32 conferences. And so we, the Big Sky Conference, we don't have a problem with the fact that there was a settlement. And that's good for the future. And it's good for the past. What we had a problem with was your second point, and that was what we felt was a very disproportionate amount of damages paid. When 94% of that money, the damages, is going to the A5 football and basketball players, and then to have them only pay 40% of it to their former student athletes, it was quite a gut punch, and it's continued to be that way. So disappointed in the process, know that a legal proceeding doesn't allow for complete openness all the time. But that's not in the spirit of the way the NCAA does business. Typically, we make decisions as a group of 32 that affect all 32. And we didn't have representation. We didn't have a seat at the table, and to have our wages garnished for that money to go to people like Zion Williamson and Joe Burrow. That strikes a really tough chord in the Big Sky Conference.
So if this whole settlement was negotiated and they decided we're going to pay this amount, everybody else going to pay this amount, how did you find out about what would be transpiring and what your league will be required to pay as a result?
Yeah, we had a commissioner's call with all 32 conferences, and Charlie Baker was on, the NCAA CFO and their legal counsel, and basically walked us through, here's what the settlement is, here's what happens with the look back. The first part of it is the damages for the previous 6 years before NIL, and then the second part of it, which is the next 10 years. So they walked us through that, and that's when they announced how the finances were going to work.
As you've watched this whole process and landscape change over the last several years in college athletics as a commissioner of a conference, what would you say puzzles or confuses you the most? What makes you look and go, why are we doing this, or can we not find a better way to do that outside of this specific settlement?
Yeah, I think it's that college athletics, we used to strike somewhat of a balance between money and providing great opportunities for student athletes to go to college, play athletics, and graduate. And now every decision is all about money. Conference expansion, the unsettlement that's out there, the choppy waters, it's all driven by money and greed. And I'm a believer, once you sell yourself to money, you'll always sell yourself to money. And that's where we found ourselves. So, I've been in this business for 30 years, never seen it like this. Disappointing that we're here. And now we got to figure out a way to find our way through.
How do you, running an FCS football and basketball conference with a variety of other sports as well, but how do you try and position yourself to be in one of strength when so many things are changing in school? I do play-by-play for Southern Utah, and we're having schools leave our league this year and next year. UTRGV and Stephen F. Austin are going back to the Southland, and you've got Seattle U and GCU going to the West Coast Conference. What's kind of your thought process when you see those moves and you think about how you continue to position your league to be in one of strength?
Yeah, all we can do in the Big Sky is worry about what we can control. So we focus in on that. How can we be the best we can be? We feel like we're the true college athletics because we still talk about graduation. We still talk about providing broad-based athletic programs in a regional way, and not just about the money. So So we focus in on that. We discuss that. We just finished our spring meetings with our presidents and ADs and faculty reps and senior women's administrators, and we talked about all of those things. We talked about the changing landscape. We talked about everything happening around us. We talked about there's some things we should do, some moves we should make, some things we don't want to do. But we always come back to kind of our core values of what we're about, and that's providing our student athletes a great experience, providing them an education, an opportunity to graduate and play athletics at a level that they love. And so that's how we do it. That's how we making sure we focus on what we can control and things that happen around us. We pay attention to them and we're aware and we discuss those, but we're not going to let those dictate the way we manage our business.
I've talked several times on this show about something that to me seems plain and obvious, that I'm not confident the Big Ten and the SEC always have the broader public's best interests in mind in college athletics, and they just continue. And I thought the House settlement decision that affects your conference and many others was just kind of the latest example of that they are, they're bulldozers, and they're just clearing a path to set themselves up to be these major power players in college athletics. Do you see any way that those two leagues kind of breaking away? For now, they haven't formally, of course, broken away, but just kind of metaphorically, they're pulling away, the widening gap between them and everybody else. Do you see any way that can ever slow down?
No, but I don't necessarily think that's bad. The way I look at it is those two conferences are so strong, so powerful. From a media perspective, just the revenue they can generate, they just run a different business than the rest of us do. So I don't have any ill will towards them because, I worked at two of those schools in the Power Five, or the Power Two. They do their business and they're really good at it. So they're going to continue to grow and dominate, and they're going to settle where they settle. What they leave behind, that's what's going to be interesting. The two other conferences, the G5, FCS, who knows what that looks like with us someday. But, because I can see a day where the two of them break away, and I wouldn't blame them one bit because their business is so different from 95% of the rest of the NCAA. In some ways, it's like basketball is the only thing that binds us together is the wonderful March Madness for men's and women's basketball. Other than that, we're so dissimilar. So, like I said, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't have any ill will towards them. I do feel concerned about, is anyone looking out for kind of the good of college athletics
or the athletes?
And we don't have a commissioner over college athletics. The NCAA exists, but the power seems to be with the commissioners and the presidents at the A2 level. And so, that's where we're at right now. And I don't know how that plays out. But, like I said, as long as these waters are so choppy, anything could happen.
I converse with and run into just, in my daily life or on the golf course anywhere, fans that feel discouraged at times with realignment, NIL, portal, like all these just big, massive changes. It feels very different. And something that I remind people of is once the games start again, it'll be easy to forget about that. But right now, I understand why people are focused on it and can feel discouraged by it. What would be your message to those people who look at college athletics and say, this is too different from what I grew up with, from what I remember, this is frustrating, this part's annoying, or I don't care for this and that. What do you say to those fans about where college athletics is?
Well, I think change is inevitable in every part of our lives. And, whether it be technology. Years ago, before you were born, Spencer, we never dreamed we'd have cell phones, right? that would do these unbelievable things, right? Now look at us. So change is inevitable. We have to embrace change. I've encouraged our coaches, it's kind of like the transfer portal. We can argue and fight about it all we want, but it's here to stay. So the coaches that embrace it are going to be the most successful. So that's what we have to do, whether it's people like us that work in the business or just general fans. You got to embrace change. You got to get closer with those athletic programs you support and realize that success can mean different things to different people. Some schools are chasing national championships. Others love to just provide a great outlet for their community to come together and celebrate sports. And that's the cool thing about college sports. There's all different opportunities to be part of it. And we don't have to always be together. We don't always have to try to do things the same. But change continues to happen, and we're not done yet. And we'll see how it plays out. But from the Big Sky perspective, like I said, I feel good about where we're at and what we're doing it. We're doing it for the right reasons. And we got really good leadership in our presidents and ADs that help keep us on track.
Brawl of the Wild being on College game day is something I will be lobbying for myself in the fall. It's a fantastic environment, and there are a lot of great FCS programs out there, many of them in the Big Sky. And we're so fortunate to have had Tom Wistrcill, commissioner of the Big Sky Conference. Tom, thank you so much for stopping by.
Happy to be on, Spencer. Good luck to you.
Thank you. How good is Iowa going to be this year? We'll talk about that coming up next. Welcome back to everybody's favorite game. Will Iowa score points? We'll find out in the fall. Craig Sheeman, Locked On Big Ten, joining me here. It's been the $1 million question for the Hawkeyes and Kirk Ferentz. Can they just not be great, not even be okay? Can they be better than deplorable on offense? That's really the age-old question. Can they do that this year, Craig?
I have some big concerns about their offense. Now, I'll take you back last summer. I did a few podcasts on the Hawkeyes, and I said they could win between 9 and 11 games. I said they got Cade McNamara coming in from Michigan. All he has to do is be average. I said the defense is great, and I got a lot of flack for that, okay? So I was pro Iowa. They were the car wreck on the side of the road. You couldn't take your eyes off. I watched every game, every 10-7 game they had, and they ended up winning 10 games and making it to the Big Ten championship. Their defense was that good. The offense struggled, but they won. I don't have that same vibe this year that despite a lacking offense, that they're going to win a lot of games. I don't know that Tim Lester is a step up from Brian Ferentz. Tim Lester has a fairly unremarkable career as an offensive guy, of course, former head coach as well, but that job took forever to fill because I think it's a job killer. Whoever takes that job, and he took it as the offensive coordinator at Iowa, they're not going to score a lot of points again this year. He's not going to be like, oh, we got a new guy in here. Brian Ferentz is gone. All of a sudden, they're going to score 30 a game. That's not happening. And by the way, Cade McNamara, I'm not that high on him either. I mean, there was a reason Michigan moved on. He had a really good team around him, and yeah, he got him to a playoff game. But as soon as J.J. McCarthy came in town, Cade is out, and he's had 3 injuries in 18 months. He arrived from Michigan with an injury, so he didn't do spring ball last year. He got a new injury in summer camp, and was not the same at the beginning of the season, although he played the first few games. And then he got injured with a season-ending injury there in week 4 or 5 against Michigan State, and he missed spring ball again this year. I mean, he threw, but he can't move. He can't set in the pocket. So, they had to bring in Brendan Sullivan, who started 4 games at Northwestern last year as a backup because Deacon Hill transferred out. He wasn't that good anyway. But I have some grave concerns at quarterback. They didn't upgrade anything at wide receiver. They've got LaShawn Williams at running back, and they got Luke Lachey at tight end. That's it. That's their offense. And so I'm very concerned.
Last year, they were around 15 points per game, which sounds fake.
Yeah.
Because in 2024, in 2004, maybe not. Maybe that's just, towards the bottom of the conference in scoring. But in an era in which the rules and coaching innovation is all favoring the offensive side of the football, it's kind of bewildering that they haven't been able to figure this out. And I think the comparison to Lincoln Riley teams is a fair one, though they have not achieved at the same level as Lincoln Riley teams historically. Lincoln Riley's been in the playoffs several times, but Iowa last year lost the Big Ten championship game, and USC a couple of years ago lost the Pac-12 championship game because that one side of the ball that they just can't fix, they just haven't been able to overcome that. So what do you think Iowa needs to do this year? Because they've got a pretty workable schedule, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. what do they need to do offensively? What does Tim Lester, the offensive coordinator, need to bring to the table in order for Iowa to be a 10-win team again and therefore a playoff contender?
First of all, it was a little bizarre hearing Lincoln Riley and Kirk Ferentz in the same sentence. I have to recover from that for a moment. But I don't hold out a lot more hope that they can get closer to 20 points a game offensively. They're going to have to win with defense again. Of course, Cooper DeJean is gone. They had the best punter in the world in Torrey Taylor, who went to the Bears. He really was a game changer because he flipped the field every time he was out there. Now on defense, they've got all seniors and graduate transfers. So it's a very experienced, no-name defense, if you will. They're going to hold opponents down. You mentioned the favorable schedule. So it's going to be just try and score one more point than we give up. Again, it's going to be a repeat of last year. And I don't know that they can get to 10 wins again. I would expect them to take a step back. I think 7. I think a winning season in a bowl game is reasonable, but I think that's it. I think that's the ceiling for this football team. Now, again, I was big on them last year on being able to win a lot of games. They did that. I don't know if they can do it again this year with this team.
I think Tim Lester is going to have an opportunity to prove his worth, and if he is the hire that Kirk Ferentz needs him to be, then things could go very, very well in Iowa City, because this schedule is not exactly a gauntlet. You go through, and yes, you play Ohio State, but you don't play Michigan. They've got 2 West Coast schools in the fold, but it's the weaker of the 2. Between Oregon and Washington, who's expected to be better? Oregon. They play Washington. Between USC and UCLA, who's expected to be better? USC by quite a sizable amount. They play UCLA instead. And you just go through the schedule, and it looks like this. Illinois State, then they've got the Corn Cyhawk series. That is a home game against the Cyclones. Talked about that game yesterday on the show, which will tell us a lot, frankly, about both teams, but especially Iowa State. Right. Then they play Troy. So that's at least 2 wins in their first 3 games. Then they go at Minnesota, at Ohio State. Tough to start on the road, but that means the second half of the year they're playing a lot of home games. And there's a lot of Michigan States and Northwestern, Wisconsin, UCLA, Maryland, Nebraska on the schedule. And you just look at it and go, I don't know if they're winning all these games, Craig, but they're not winning none of them. And so the question is, how many are they going to be able to rack up? Because if you go 10-2 in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're a playoff contender. And that's what Iowa was last year. I think they got exposed a little bit in the bowl game against Tennessee.
Yeah.
But that's just the reality of their schedule.
And I also think that Minnesota game early on is very winnable as well. So they might get on a roll before they hit the easy part of their schedule with all the home games. Yeah, that's so bizarre. Look, I think with the typical 10-2 team in the Big Ten is Penn State, right? They do that every year. They win all their games except against Michigan, Ohio State. They don't have Michigan this year. And so I think teams with a couple of losses get in the playoffs. I think an expanded playoff really helps a Penn State team. It's unfathomable to me to think that, if Iowa wins that, runs the table, like you say, and is 10-2, and that they're a playoff team, it blows my mind. And I say that with all due respect. Like I said, I loved watching Iowa last year. I was rooting for them. They were, the little guy that could with no offense, and they did it. And I'm a fan of Kirk Ferentz. He's been around there now 26 years.
He's an old school guy. Guy. 1999, he took the head coaching job.
Yeah. He used to. I had a national radio show back in the day. He used to come on my show every week for several years. So I like him, and I'm rooting for him. And I wonder personally how long he's going to go. They got the new athletic director, Beth Getz, that came in, who replaced Gary Barta, who was really close to Ferentz, and all that. While that was going on, we're firing his son, Brian Ferentz, and I still think he loves the kids. I still think he loves the game day. I still think he loves the camaraderie. But I wonder how much longer he wants to put up with all this other stuff. He really hasn't. I can't say he's embraced the transfer portal. They had the close call with Caden Proctor. Caden Proctor from Iowa decides to go to Alabama, plays his freshman year there, decides he's transferring back home, coming to Iowa, actually got on campus for a couple of weeks, went on spring break with his Alabama buddies and decided he was transferring back to Iowa. That was a big loss. That would have really helped them up front with some help on the offensive line that they needed. But he really hasn't totally embraced the transfer portal, some of the other stuff that's going on.
I think the missed opportunity to hire Scott Frost here is just wildly evident, because that felt like it would have been the storybook hire of sorts. Big Ten legend Scott Frost come in to try and fix the offense that hasn't been able to be fixed in recent memory. But if they do, you got to watch out for Iowa. It is, however, as Craig mentioned, a pretty big if. Quarterback situation, just okay. Skill position guys, fine, decent. So, but is it anything that's going to, now, conversely, the offenses in the Big Ten, not exactly a bunch of world beaters out there.
I've been talking about on my podcast, I'm trying to figure out who the best quarterback is, who the best newcomers. I don't think there's a clear-cut runner. Dylan Gabriel, maybe. I think Luke Altmaier at Illinois steps up this year. Drew Aller, I'm not convinced. He's took a step backward at Penn State. It's wide open. Offensively, like you said, it is wide open in the Big Ten. If anybody can put some offense together, they may be head and shoulders above everybody else. Oh, and that might be Ohio State, by the way. But I'm not a Will Howard fan either. I think Will Howard is the weakest link on that football team. It
is not the best year for quarterbacks and offense in the Big Ten. That could change in the coming years, but right now you just got a lot. You got a lot of questions and a lot of, he's fine. Yeah, he gets the job done. He'll do it, but. Is he going to the Heisman ceremony? No, probably
maybe
not.
Miller Moss at USC with his 6-touchdown Holiday Bowl. Who knows?
And it's one game, and that's the thing. And I was talking about USC recently. I have more questions about Miller Moss than their defense being better. I think their defense, it won't be great, but it'll be better than last year because they set the bar so darn low. But I look at Miller Moss and I'm like, I've seen one game. It's like Jackson Arnold to Oklahoma. It's one game.
Hey, you know what? Let me bring it all together. If we could, we mentioned that it sounded weird. Lincoln Riley and Kirk Ferentz in the same sentence. Let's take the Iowa defense and let's take the USC offense. Now we got something.
We got a national champion is what we have right there. Yeah, Craig Schumann, Locked On Big Ten. Check him out. Thank you, Craig.
You bet.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.